case ceased in his teens. Not, I should add, because he has any sort of diagnosable mental condition, but because he's weak-willed and self-indulgent. While I've worked hard to establish a secure career and stable lifestyle, Edward staggered from useless job to meaningless relationship to seedy flat. No surprise, then, that he ended up crawling back to my mother in his 40s. It's a shock to be told that a close relative has died, even when they were old and had been unwell, and I found that I needed to spend several minutes sitting quietly and gathering my thoughts. As I was in London, though, and my mother's body was in Birmingham, there was little of any practical use for me to do. I therefore decided to go to work and carry on as normal, or as normal as I could fake with this relentless nausea. I wouldn't tell anyone at the office of my mother's death. I could imagine the orgy of fussing and sighing, the clammy embraces and the expressions of sorrow for the loss of someone they'd never met and didn't even know existed. Not really my sort of thing. Emerging from the tube station near my office building, I was struck by the heat, which had already risen to a level sufficient to soften the fresh tarmac outside the exit. The noise and fumes from the crawling traffic seemed amplified, and the piercing intensity of the sunlight stung the backs of my retinas. Once at the relative sanctuary of my desk, which is in the quietest corner of a large open-plan office, I switched on the fan and trained it on my face. Somewhat revived, I spent a few minutes, as I like to every morning, checking the cacti I have ranged across the front of my desk. I ascertained that there were no areas of rot or any parts that looked shriveled or dry, dusted them with a soft paintbrush, ensured that the moisture levels in the compost were correct, and turned them to maintain an even exposure to daylight. When that was done, I opened a case file. I hoped that grappling with the particularly challenging report I needed to submit to my head of department at the end of the following week would help me elbow the events of earlier that morning to the back of my mind. Mine might not be the most exciting of jobs for someone with a law degree, but it suits me. Most of the students on my course went on to train as solicitors or barristers, but I found myself drawn to the security of a government career, the predictable, if ungenerous, pay scales, the tolerable pension scheme, and the fact that I wouldn't be subject to the whims of senior partners or heads of chambers. Although my work doesn't make use of my degree, and although I don't have the kind of expertise I'd have if I'd gained a professional qualification, my broad knowledge of the law and the workings of officialdom come in remarkably useful when I need to pursue a complaint. If it wasn't for the fact that I have colleagues, office life would be bearable. That day, however, even more than usual, I had a catalogue of annoyances and irritations with which to contend. For example, it was barely 10:30, when the smell of leftover Chinese takeaway that one of my stockier workmates likes to microwave in our tiny kitchenette and eat mid-morning wafted across to my desk. The bile was rising in my throat, and I needed a long cold drink if I was to avoid an emergency dash to the lavatory. I made it over to the water cooler, where I was less than delighted to encounter Tom, a bouncy, recently joined administrative assistant, who still had evidence of a breakfast baguette in his luxuriant beard. He was to be the next source of irritation. "Hey, Susan, just the woman. I've been meaning to say, I've set up an office Facebook group for organising pub sessions and sharing stuff that's going down. Fling me a friend request and I'll add you to the group." "You haven't been here long, have you?" I managed to say as the water glugged into my glass. "Everyone knows I'm not on Facebook."
Whoa, for real? So how do you connect with people? Are you on Instagram or WhatsApp? I can set up groups on there too.
I'm not on anything. I find picking up the phone or sending a text usually works.
Yeah, that's okay for, like, your mum or whatever. But how do you keep track of all your old mates from school and uni? How do you organise your social life?
I wasn't in the mood for this. For some reason my eyes were pricking. Perhaps it was the harsh overhead lighting. I explained briskly that I had no desire to maintain contact with people I'd had a fleeting connection with many years ago, and that I kept my life very simple. If he felt compelled to inform me of office get-togethers or an important piece of workplace intelligence...